Welcome to the garden. Today I'm going to be setting up my rain barrels. We've been using these for a few years and they really do a great job of collecting and storing excess rainwater. I've got it set up right here, but you can see it's a little wonky. This has shifted over time. So before I do anything else, I want to make sure I level this off. That way we don't get overflowing towards the house. If we do have any overflow, I would rather have it be towards the garden. I'm just going to be using a little bit of native soil with a couple of rocks mixed in. Ideally you'd want to use just rock. It's much less likely to shift again. But I'm going to use just what I have, so we'll see if we can level this out. This is also a great time to raise this up. The higher your water barrel is, the easier it'll be to access. Our base has been raised up about an inch, and it's now leaning a little bit more towards the garden. So all that's left is to attach a little modification to the downspout. So we're going to be attaching this little elbow, and this used to be down at the bottom, but we've taken out a whole piece, so now it'll feed directly into our barrel. So now our downspout feeds directly into the barrel. These things are wonderful for saving water. I can water the garden for weeks without turning on the hose once. Now there's a whole bunch of factors that you need to think about when setting this up, but I'd like to focus on two. The two main things are clean gutters. The second thing that I like to focus on is the outflow. You can see we've got some leaves up there, but we have a huge area that feeds the barrel, so we've got plenty of water, but it can kind of get a little skunky. It's like filtered through leaves and algae and all sorts of stuff up in the gutter system. So clean gutters is, I think, the most important thing when considering a location. They say to keep it out of sunlight, but we have one on the other side of the house in full sun, and it's pure and clean, whereas this one gets a little stinky from the dirty gutters. So keep your gutters clean and you'll have beautiful clean water. So the second most important thing is the runoff. Down at the bottom there's a little valve, and I just like to keep it open. That way if we get overflow, we can control it and actually portion it off into buckets like this. So I'll show you how I do that. This unit came with this little hook. So we hook it up here by the top, and then we take the hose up to the top so that once the water climbs up the bucket, it's also climbing up the hose. And when it reaches right about here, where that hose is going to be, it'll overflow out the hose instead of continuing out the top of the bucket. I've extended our little hook with another little makeshift hook like this so that we can get an even lower overflow point. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. If you keep this part airtight, this is a little extended hose, you can get what's called a siphon. And the siphon will drain all the way down to its lowest point. So once the siphon becomes active, it'll draw the water through and push all the water down to the base. So it's important to loosen this just enough to get a little oxygen in there. And you'll kind of hear it fizzle and spittle when it's full. That way we just don't lose all of it. It's more of a trickle instead of a flood. Then you can set up buckets. One bucket will do the job, so it'll overflow directly in here. But I've set up a little 2-bucket system. So right back there, that little rock, I stick a bucket up on here, and this is what I put the hose in. This fills up until it reaches that overflow point. Then if you set another bucket right here, just like this, it meets up and it'll flow into this bucket. So you could do this a whole bunch of different times. I've just set up a simple 2-bucket method. So let's follow the path of the water. So it rolls off of the roof, down through the gutters, into the downspout, where it then fills our barrel and fills the hose at the same time. So the water level's rising, because we keep that valve at the bottom open. Then once we reach right about here, it starts flowing over down into our first bucket, and then overflowing like a little waterfall into our second bucket. This keeps that overflow a little bit further from the house. It means we get 2 extra buckets of water, which can be really handy. And then I use these just to empty the barrel every now and then too. If you're not going to use buckets, I'd still recommend keeping this valve open with a high point that's also open, so you get that trickle effect. Then just simply take the hose and put it as far away from the house as possible. It helps to have a little plant nearby. We've got quite a few in here, so they kind of help absorb overflow. We're using the same principle on this side of the house, where we keep this valve open so that as the barrel fills, so does the hose, up to an overflow, where this part's open so we don't create a siphon, but it can still overflow. And we're actually just taking this all the way down over here to the edge of the garden. And it's right in the garden, which is just perfect. So picking a good location can save you trips back and forth. But I hope you guys are setting up rain barrels this year. So there's quite a lot to think about, but the 2 that I think are most important are clean gutters and what you do with your overflow. So I hope this helps you guys when you're setting up your rain barrels. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.